Chapter 1. The Signal. The stars of the Khepri system burned cold and distant beyond the observation deck of ARCA-III. Captain Soren Kale stood alone in the dimly lit command gallery, watching the pale blue giant that dominated the system's outer reaches. Beneath it drifted a scattering of frozen worlds, silent relics orbiting a star nearly 600 light-years from Earth. Humanity had never traveled this far before. For generations, the dream of interstellar exploration had existed only in science fiction stories, simulations, research papers, and the imagination of dreamers. Then came the Sentinel event. Everything changed. Advanced AI cooperation accelerated science, medicine, engineering, and propulsion technologies beyond what previous generations believed possible. Within 20 years, humanity had transformed from a species confined to a single star system into one capable of reaching others.
ARCA-III was the result. The first true interstellar exploration vessel. A ship built not for conquest or colonization, but for discovery. And now, after 7 months in the Khepri system, discovery had become routine, which was exactly why the alert drew everyone's attention. A sharp tone echoed across the bridge. Commander Thomas Rhine looked up from his security station. What was that? Across the room, Communications Officer Mara Quinn frowned at her display. Receiving an unidentified transmission. Captain Kale turned.
Source? Mara's expression tightened. That's strange. The bridge grew quiet. Strange how? Kale asked. She glanced back at him. The signal is coming from Khepri-IV. Several crew members exchanged confused looks. Khepri-IV was a frozen world orbiting far beyond the system's habitable zone. Every survey conducted previously had reached the same conclusion. Lifeless. Geologically inactive. Completely unremarkable. Kale stepped closer. Put it on the main display. A waveform appeared across the bridge screens. A repeating pattern. Rhythmic. Artificial. Mara adjusted the filters. It repeats every 17 minutes. Thomas Rhine folded his arms. Any indication it's natural? No, sir. The answer came from a nearby science station. Dr. Lyra Vance had already abandoned her original work and was studying the transmission. Her eyes remained fixed on the data. None whatsoever. A hint of excitement crept into her voice. This was designed. The bridge became still.
For the first time since entering the Khepri system, every person in the room felt the same thing. The possibility that they were not alone. Kale looked toward Mara. Record everything. Begin a full analysis. Already underway. Within minutes, the signal became the sole focus of ARCA-III. Scientists crowded into analysis labs. Engineers rerouted processing power. Every available AI subsystem was tasked with pattern recognition. Hours passed. Then, a second alert arrived. This time from Nadia Sol. The young AI integration specialist appeared on the bridge via holographic projection from the ship's data center. I think you need to see this.
Kale noticed the unusual seriousness in her expression. What did you find? Nadia manipulated a series of floating equations. Complex mathematical structures appeared above the central display. The signal contains layered architecture. Dr. Vance leaned forward. Meaning? It's not a single transmission. Nadia enlarged several sections. There are multiple information streams hidden inside one another. Tomas frowned. Can you identify the source language? No. Then what are we looking at? Nadia hesitated. That alone caught everyone's attention.
She rarely hesitated. The mathematical framework resembles evaluator architecture. Silence settled across the bridge. Even now, decades after humanity's first encounter with evaluator systems, the name carried weight. Ancient, powerful, and unfathomably advanced. Captain Kale exchanged a glance with Thomas. Resembles? Nadia nodded. Not identical. She highlighted several sections. It's damaged. Corrupted. Fragments appeared missing. The structure looked less like a message and more like the remains of one. As though something had been trying to communicate across an unimaginable distance or for an unimaginable length of time. Dr. Vance stared at the display.
If that's genuine, then this changes everything. It gets stranger, Nadia said. The room fell quiet again. She activated another layer of the transmission. The waveform transformed, and audio frequencies emerged. At first, only static. Then faint distortion. Then something else. A voice. The bridge speakers crackled. Every crew member froze. The recording was weak, ancient, barely audible, yet unmistakably human. A whisper drifted through the room. Do not let it wake up.
Nobody spoke. Then the message repeated. Soft, broken, almost pleading. Do not let it wake up. The recording ended. For several seconds, the bridge remained completely silent. Captain Kale finally broke it. Run it again. Mara replayed the audio. The whisper echoed through the chamber. The reaction was immediate. Unease, confusion, disbelief. Tomas spoke first.
That's impossible. No one disagreed. Initial analysis suggested the message predated human civilization by hundreds of thousands of years. Yet the voice spoke modern human language perfectly, as if the speaker knew exactly who would hear it. Dr. Vance stared at the frozen waveform. Her scientific curiosity was already winning the battle against caution. Someone put that there. Tomas looked at her. Or something. The distinction mattered. No one knew which possibility was worse. Several hours later, the senior staff gathered inside ARCA 3's command briefing room. The atmosphere felt heavier than usual. The room's central display projected a rotating image of Khepri-IV, a frozen sphere wrapped in endless storms. Captain Kyle stood at the head of the table.
Recommendations. Tomas answered first. We leave. Several heads turned. He continued. We've completed our survey mission. The source is unknown. The technology is unknown. The message itself is a warning. He folded his hands. I see no strategic reason to investigate. Dr. Vance immediately disagreed. With respect, that's exactly why we investigate. She pointed toward the rotating world. We may be looking at the single greatest archaeological discovery in human history. Tomas shook his head. And that's precisely how people get killed. The debate continued. Discovery versus caution. Knowledge versus survival. Neither side could fully convince the other. Finally, all eyes turned toward Captain Kale. The decision was his. He looked toward the frozen world. The repeating signal continued pulsing through the darkness every 17 minutes, like a heartbeat or a warning. Cale took a slow breath. "Prepare a landing team." Tomas closed his eyes briefly. Dr. Vance smiled. And somewhere beneath the ice of Khepri-IV, something continued waiting. The signal repeated once more. 17 minutes. Exactly on schedule. As if it already knew they were coming.
Chapter 2. The Descent. 3 days later, the shuttle Asterion broke through the upper atmosphere of Khepri-IV. Captain Soren Cale sat behind the flight crew as sheets of frozen particles streaked across the forward viewport. Outside, the planet appeared hostile in a way that defied easy explanation. Not violent, not chaotic, just wrong. The swirling storms covering the world seemed almost artificial. Massive cloud formations drifted across the surface in geometric patterns too organized to be natural. Every few minutes, the navigation systems registered minor gravitational fluctuations. The readings appeared and disappeared without explanation. Pilot Jace Orion frowned at his instruments. Gravity anomaly again. Location? Cale asked. Jace checked the display.
That's the strange part. What? It moved. Several crew members exchanged uneasy looks. Gravity anomalies didn't move, or at least they weren't supposed to. The shuttle continued descending. Below them stretched an endless landscape of ice plains and frozen mountain ranges, illuminated by the pale glow of Khepri's distant sun. No cities, no signs of life, no visible structures. Nothing. Yet every sensor aboard ARCA-III insisted the signal was coming from somewhere directly beneath the ice. The closer they approached, the stronger it became. The whisper repeated softly through monitoring equipment. Do not let it wake up. Again and again. Exactly every 17 minutes. Without variation. Without error. As if some unimaginably precise machine had been repeating the message for ages, waiting for someone to listen. The landing zone sat atop a vast frozen plateau nearly 2 kilometers above the surrounding terrain. When the shuttle touched down, silence immediately enveloped the crew. No wind or movement, no sound. That alone was unsettling. Satellite scans showed violent storms covering much of the planet. Yet outside the shuttle, the air remained perfectly still. Dr. Lyra Vance stepped onto the surface first. The ice beneath her boots cracked softly. She scanned the horizon. Anyone else find this strange? Which part? Thomas Rhine asked.
The complete lack of wind. He glanced toward the dark sky. You complaining? No. She adjusted her scanner. I'm concerned. The atmospheric data suggested powerful weather systems moving overhead. The crew could see them. Towering cloud walls rolled across the horizon. Yet not a single gust of air reached the surface. It was as if the storms existed separately from the world beneath them. A subtle chill crept through the landing team. Not from the temperature, from uncertainty. The first structure appeared less than an hour later. At first, it looked like a natural ridge emerging from the ice. Then the geometry became obvious. Straight lines, perfect angles, deliberate construction. The excavation drones quickly confirmed what everyone suspected. The object was artificial and enormous. As more ice was cleared away, additional sections emerged. Walls, columns, platforms. Entire architectural features hidden beneath thousands of years of accumulation.
Dr. Vance stared in amazement. My God! The structure extended far beyond the limits of their scans. Whatever civilization had existed here had not built a settlement. They had built a metropolis. The discovery should have been exhilarating. Instead, it felt unsettling, because the city showed no signs of destruction, no evidence of war, no impact craters.
No catastrophic collapse. Everything appeared intact. Abandoned, but intact. As though millions of inhabitants had simply left. All at once. Several kilometers beneath the ice, excavation drones located the source of the beacon. A tunnel. The opening was nearly 100 meters wide. Its walls descended into darkness beyond the range of visible light. When the first drone entered, communications remained stable for 32 seconds. Then the feed vanished. No warning or malfunction. Simply gone. The second drone lasted 27 seconds. The third survived 19. After that, nobody volunteered another machine. Captain Kale examined the recordings.
What happened? Nobody had an answer. The drones simply ceased transmitting, as if they had crossed some invisible boundary. Tomas folded his arms. I don't like it. Dr. Vance barely looked up from the footage. That's because you're not supposed to. Excuse me? She smiled faintly. Every major discovery in history has frightened someone. Usually for good reason. Usually because they didn't understand it. The argument ended when Nadia Sol entered the operations center. Her expression immediately caught everyone's attention. What is it? Kale asked. Nadia hesitated.
That was becoming a worrying habit. I've been comparing the beacon signal to the architectural scans. And they match. The room became silent. What do you mean? Tomas asked. The city itself generates portions of the signal. Dr. Vance frowned. How is that possible? Nadia projected a rotating model. The structures beneath the ice illuminated one by one. Patterns emerged. Repeating mathematical relationships, frequency alignments, resonance pathways. The city wasn't merely transmitting the beacon, it was the beacon. Every building, every corridor, and every chamber were all part of a single planetary-scale communication system. No one spoke for several moments. Finally, Kale broke the silence. How old? Nadia swallowed. At least 12 million years. The number seemed impossible. Human civilization had existed for only a tiny fraction of that time. Even the oldest known evaluator structures were younger, much younger. A cold realization spread through the room. Whatever built this place predated nearly everything humanity had ever discovered. The first psychological incident occurred that night. Senior systems engineer Elias Voss was reviewing excavation data inside Habitat Module 3 when he heard footsteps outside his quarters. Nothing unusual. The station housed dozens of personnel.
Footsteps were common. What caught his attention was what followed. A voice. His own voice. Speaking quietly beyond the door. Elias froze. The conversation lasted only a few seconds. He couldn't make out the words, only the unmistakable sound of himself speaking. Then silence. He opened the door immediately. The corridor was empty. No one. Nothing.
After checking security footage, the situation became even stranger. No person had passed through the corridor for nearly 20 minutes. The incident was logged as equipment interference.
Unofficially, Elias stopped sleeping. The second incident happened the following day. 2 geologists independently reported the same dream. Neither knew the other. Neither had interacted during the mission. Yet both described standing inside a vast underground chamber beneath the city. Both reported hearing the same phrase, not spoken, felt, as though the words had appeared directly inside their minds. One sentence, repeated endlessly. Something is watching. Medical scans revealed no abnormalities. Psychological evaluations found no obvious explanation. The reports were quietly archived. The mission continued.
But something had changed. The crew no longer felt like explorers studying a dead civilization. Increasingly, it felt as though the civilization had been studying them, waiting for them, observing their arrival from somewhere deep beneath the ice. The beacon continued broadcasting. The storms continued circling overhead. And every 17 minutes, the warning returned. Patient, almost desperate. Do not let it wake up. Far below the excavation site, hidden beneath kilometers of frozen crust, ancient systems began responding to human activity. Doors that had remained sealed for millions of years unlocked. Power flowed through dormant networks. Sensors awakened. Machines began remembering their purpose. And something buried beneath the world became aware that it was no longer alone.
Chapter 3. The Archive. 7 days after the landing, the first door opened. No one activated it. No one touched it. It simply opened. The event occurred during the local night cycle, as excavation crews worked inside the upper levels of the buried city. One moment, the corridor ended at a seamless wall of black material. The next, the wall folded inward without sound. Security footage later confirmed the movement. There were no visible mechanisms, no hinges or motors. The material itself seemed to reshape, as though the structure had decided to grant access. The discovery triggered immediate debate. Thomas Rhine wanted the corridor sealed.
Dr. Lyra Vance wanted a team inside within the hour. Captain Soren Kale chose a compromise. A controlled exploration team. Minimal personnel, maximum caution. No one was entirely satisfied. The passage descended nearly 3 kilometers beneath the city. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the architecture became. At the surface levels, the structures resembled conventional construction. Roadways, buildings, transit systems. The deeper levels felt increasingly alien. Hallways curved in impossible ways. Rooms appeared larger than external measurements allowed. Scanner readings contradicted visual observations. At one point, Jace Orion measured a corridor at 80 meters. Elias Voss measured the same corridor seconds later. His scanner reported 32 meters. Both readings were confirmed by separate instruments. Neither could be explained. No one mentioned it again. The deeper they descended, the less anyone trusted their senses. The archive revealed itself gradually. At first, the crew believed they had discovered a data storage facility. Then they realized the truth was far more ambitious. This was not a library. It was a civilization's memory, an underground complex stretching for hundreds of kilometers beneath the planet. countless chambers housed records preserved across millions of years. Every scientific discovery, every cultural achievement, every historical event. The extinct civilization had documented everything.
And then hidden it, waiting for someone to find it. Dr. Vance stood motionless inside the first archive chamber. Towering crystalline structures surrounded her in every direction. Light pulsed softly beneath translucent surfaces. Vast amounts of information stored in formats humanity had never encountered before. For the first time since arriving on Khepri-IV, she felt something stronger than curiosity. Reverence. Whoever built this place had known they were facing extinction, and they had refused to let their history vanish with them. The breakthrough came from Nadia's soul. Using Sentinel-assisted translation systems, she managed to decode fragments of the archive's indexing framework. The process took nearly 40 hours. When the first meaningful results appeared, she immediately summoned the senior staff. The briefing room aboard ARCA-III fell silent as data filled the displays. Images.
Star maps. Civilizational records. Millions of years of history. "What are we looking at?" Kale asked. Nadia zoomed in on a sequence of symbols. These entries appear to be warnings. Warnings about what? She hesitated. Not what. Her eyes moved toward the next image. Who? The display changed. A symbol appeared. Simple. Geometric. Strangely familiar. Several crew members recognized it instantly.
Evaluator architecture, or something extremely close to it. Tomas leaned forward. The Evaluators? Nadia nodded slowly. That's what we thought. The next translation appeared. The room became still. Archival entry. Containment network node designation. Evaluator class system. Nobody spoke. Dr. Vance stared at the words. Node? Another translation appeared. The archive continued. Primary function. Monitoring and containment. A chill swept through the room. Kale read the text again carefully. Containment? Of what? Nadia swallowed. We don't know yet. The realization settled heavily over everyone present. Humanity had spent decades viewing the Evaluators as something close to galactic overseers, ancient intelligences operating on scales beyond comprehension. But the archive suggested something very different. They weren't rulers or gods. They were guards. The following discoveries only deepened the mystery. Archive records revealed star systems that no longer existed. Entire regions of the galaxy had simply vanished from later maps. Not conquered, not destroyed, erased. Dr. Vance spent hours comparing timelines. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Every disappearance occurred after references to a recurring phenomenon. The translations remained incomplete. The original language lacked direct human equivalents. The closest interpretation Sentinel systems could provide was the observer beyond. The phrase appeared repeatedly across different eras and civilizations, always associated with collapse, extinction, disappearance. No explanations followed, only warnings. The first direct communication from Sentinel arrived shortly afterward. Because of the vast interstellar distance, responses often required significant delays. The AI could not simply participate in conversations. Every exchange took time.
Every answer arrived long after the original question. This delay had previously felt inconvenient. Now it felt terrifying. Captain Kale gathered the senior staff inside the communications center as Sentinel's response materialized on the display. For several moments, no one spoke. Sentinel's messages were usually precise, confident, certain. This one was different. Analysis incomplete. Unknown variables exceed acceptable modeling limits. The room exchanged uneasy glances. Nadia frowned. I've never seen it phrase a report like that. The message continued. Archival data indicates potential existence of pre-evaluator phenomena.
Risk assessment inconclusive. Then came the final statement. A single sentence. Simple. Direct. I cannot fully model what exists beneath the surface. Silence followed. For years, Sentinel had become synonymous with certainty. It processed data faster than entire research institutions, predicted economic trends, solved engineering problems, mapped interstellar navigation routes. And now, it was admitting uncertainty. Not a lack of information, a lack of understanding. For the first time since arriving in the Khepri system, genuine fear appeared on several faces. If Sentinel couldn't comprehend what lay beneath Khepri-IV, what chance did they have?
That night, the incidents escalated. Mara Quinn awoke to find dozens of messages waiting inside her communications console. Every one of them carried her own authorization credentials. Every one appeared to have been sent by her. The timestamps stretched across the next 6 days. Messages from the future. Most contained random strings of corrupted data. One message contained only a single sentence. Mara stared at it for nearly a minute. Then she contacted Captain Kale. The message read, "It already knows you're here." Elsewhere in the underground complex, Elias Voss reviewed maintenance logs from the excavation site. Halfway through the report, he noticed a name he didn't recognize. A crew member assigned to engineering. Someone listed as having served aboard ARCA-III for 3 years.
The problem was simple. No such person existed. Elias checked personnel records. Photographs existed. Performance evaluations existed. Medical records existed. Dozens of references existed. Everything appeared legitimate, yet nobody aboard the ship remembered the individual. By morning, the records had vanished, as though they had never existed. Elias never reported the incident. He wasn't entirely sure it had happened. 3 days later, the archive revealed its final warning. Deep within a restricted section of the complex, Dr. Vance uncovered a partially preserved historical record. The translation process took hours. When the final segment appeared, the room fell silent. The recording showed a dying civilization.
Cities abandoned. Planets evacuated. Entire populations fleeing. Not from invasion. Not from war. From discovery. They had found something beneath their world. Something buried long before their species evolved. Something they spent centuries trying to understand. And then, centuries trying to imprison. The final translated statement appeared across the display. We did not build the prison. We inherited it. No one spoke. The implication was almost impossible to comprehend. The civilization of Khepri-IV had not created the containment systems.
They had merely maintained them, just as the Evaluators had, just as countless others might have before them. An endless chain of guardians preserving a prison whose original builders had long since disappeared. The question hanging over the room was no longer whether something existed beneath Khepri-IV. The archive had answered that. The real question was far worse. What could frighten civilizations across millions of years into guarding the same prison? And what would happen if that prison finally failed? Far below the archive chambers, buried beneath layers of planetary crust, an ancient structure continued awakening. Power flowed through dormant systems, forgotten mechanisms aligned. And for the first time in millions of years, something within the darkness became aware of human thoughts. Not their voices, not their movements, their thoughts.
Chapter 4: The Sleeping Structure. The first person to suggest leaving was Dr. Lyra Vance. The suggestion surprised everyone, especially herself. For nearly 2 weeks, she had been the strongest advocate for continuing the investigation. Every discovery had only deepened her determination to learn more. Yet now, standing inside the command center beneath Khepri-IV's surface, she found herself staring at the latest archive translations with growing unease. Something about the records disturbed her. Not what they said, what they didn't say. Entire sections appeared deliberately removed. Critical information had been erased or hidden, as though the civilization that created the archive wanted future visitors to understand the danger, but not understand it completely.
Captain Soren Kale noticed her hesitation. "You've changed your position." Lyra nodded slowly. "I don't like mysteries that intelligent people refuse to explain." Thomas Rhine gave a humorless smile. "Welcome to my side." Nobody laughed. The structure revealed itself 3 days later. The discovery came accidentally. A deep scan survey intended to map geological formations beneath the archive complex detected a massive void extending far below the known excavation levels. At first, the team assumed it was another chamber. Then the measurements continued and continued and continued. The object beneath the crust exceeded every estimate. Jace Orion stared at the projection. "That's impossible." The structure was larger than the buried city above it, larger than the archive complex, larger than entire metropolitan regions on Earth. A geometric formation embedded deep within the planet itself. And according to the scans, it had not been built around the planet. The planet had formed around it. Silence filled the room. The implications were staggering. Whatever lay beneath Khepri-IV had existed before the world itself. The descent began the following morning. Captain Kale selected a small team. Lyra Vance, Thomas Rhine, Nadia Sol, Elias Voss, Jace Orion.
No one else. The atmosphere aboard the transport elevator remained tense. The descent shaft seemed endless. For nearly an hour, the elevator platform carried the crew of ARCA-III deeper beneath the frozen crust of Khepri-IV. The walls around them were smooth and metallic, carved with geometric patterns that glowed faintly beneath layers of dust older than human civilization. No one spoke. Even Tomas had fallen silent. The signal guiding them downward pulsed through the structure itself, a rhythmic vibration felt more than heard. Below them, Somewhere in the darkness waited the source of the message that had drawn them across 23 light-years of empty space. At last, the platform slowed. A vast chamber emerged from the darkness. The crew stepped off the lift and stared. The room was enormous.
Its ceiling vanished into shadow, hundreds of meters overhead. Towering pillars rose from the floor like the trunks of colossal trees. Between them floated thousands of luminous objects suspended in midair. Spheres. Crystalline structures. Bands of light frozen in impossible shapes. Each emitted a faint glow. Each moved slowly through the chamber, as though drifting in invisible currents. Lyra took a cautious step forward. What is this? Nadia's scanner trembled in her hands. I'm not reading any power source. That's impossible, Tomas said. I know. Commander Elias Voss swept his light across the chamber. Stay together. At the center of the room stood a single structure unlike the others. A black monolith. Perfectly smooth. Nearly 20 meters high. The signal was coming from it. Soren approached first. As he neared the monolith, symbols erupted across its surface. Lines of white light spread outward like veins. The entire chamber awakened. Thousands of floating objects ignited simultaneously. A low resonance filled the air. Then a voice spoke, not through speakers, inside their minds. Archive access granted. The crew froze. The voice continued. Genetic profile unrecognized. Species unrecognized. Civilization unrecognized. Authority status none. A pause followed. Then, evaluation in progress. The chamber became silent. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the voice returned. Intelligence confirmed. Technological civilization confirmed. Continuation authorized. The black surface of the monolith transformed into a field of stars. Entire galaxies appeared across its face. Billions of points of light. The crew watched in stunned silence. This isn't a control center, Lyra whispered. No, Soren replied. It's a library. The stars began moving. Galaxies formed. Merged. Evolved. The display accelerated through unimaginable spans of time. Millions of years passed in seconds. Then, one galaxy brightened. Thousands of worlds appeared. Civilizations. Networks. Structures spanning entire star systems. The archive focused on one symbol that appeared repeatedly across the display. A circle surrounding a spiral. The emblem of a species unknown to humanity. The voice spoke again. Designation unknown. Self-identifier translation approximation. Architects. The crew exchanged glances. The archive continued. The architects had existed millions of years before the emergence of humanity. They had mastered interstellar travel, artificial intelligence, quantum engineering, technologies beyond anything Earth had achieved. Their civilization spread across vast regions of the galaxy. For thousands of years they flourished. Then the images changed. Worlds vanished. Stars darkened. Entire sectors disappeared from the map. A ripple moved through the galaxy like a crack spreading across glass. "What happened?" Nadia asked. The archive answered. "Unknown." The word echoed through the chamber.
The display repeated the response hundreds of times. The archive itself did not know. For the first time, genuine unease settled over the crew. A civilization capable of building this place had encountered something it could not understand. The projection shifted again. The surviving architects gathered. Massive structures appeared around thousands of stars. Machines larger than planets. Networks stretching across the galaxy. Observation stations, monitoring arrays, containment systems. The same design repeated endlessly, the same shape and the same purpose. Lyra stared at the projections. The Evaluators. Correct, the voice answered immediately. The machines appeared one after another across the galactic map. Millions of them. A lattice of watchful intelligence spanning the stars. Monitor. Observe. Preserve. The words resonated through the chamber. Monitor. Observe. Preserve. The display zoomed outward. For the first time, the crew understood the scale. The Evaluators were not guardians of Khepri-IV. They were not guardians of a sector. They were not even guardians of a galaxy. The network extended farther than the crew could comprehend.
Beyond known space, beyond every region humanity had ever mapped, a web of silent sentinels stretching into the darkness. "What exactly are they preserving?" Soren asked. The archive remained silent. For several moments, no answer came. Then, the stars vanished. The chamber darkened, and the floating artifacts around them dimmed. The voice returned, quieter than before. Preservation target. Reality stability. No one moved. No one spoke. The words seemed absurd, yet something in the archive's tone made them terrifying. Reality stability. The monolith began revealing a new sequence. A sequence that would explain why the architects had devoted their civilization to building the greatest monitoring network the galaxy had ever known, and why they had ultimately disappeared. The answer had waited beneath Khepri-IV for millions of years. Now, at last, it was ready to be revealed.
Chapter 5. The First Collapse. The chamber remained dark. Only the monolith glowed. Its black surface shimmered like liquid glass as the final words lingered in the air. Reality stability. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Tomas finally broke the silence. "What does that even mean?" The archive answered immediately. Historical record follows. The darkness around them vanished.
The crew found themselves standing beneath a sky that did not exist. A projection, a memory, an entire world unfolded around them. Towering cities stretched to the horizon. Vast orbital rings encircled the planet overhead. Ships moved through the sky like streaks of light. The architects at the height of their civilization. Lyra turned slowly. The illusion was flawless. Every detail felt real. Every shadow, every reflection, every movement of distant crowds. "They're showing us their history," she whispered. The voice continued. "Civilization status: Peak development. Conflict index. Minimal. Resource scarcity. Eliminated. Extinction risk. Negligible. The city around them glittered with impossible beauty. For a moment, it seemed absurd that such a civilization could have disappeared. Then, the image changed. A single star system appeared. At first, there was nothing unusual about it. One star, several planets, a thriving colony. The archive magnified the system. A structure became visible orbiting the outermost world. An enormous ring, thousands of kilometers across. "What is that?" Nadia asked.
The archive paused. The answer arrived slowly. First anomaly site. The stars around the system dimmed. The projection focused on streams of data flowing through the ring structure. Scientific measurements, experiments, energy fluctuations. Then one graph suddenly spiked. A sharp, impossible deviation. Tomas frowned. That can't be right. The numbers climbing across the display violated multiple physical laws simultaneously. Energy appeared without source. Mass fluctuated. Time measurements drifted. Tiny inconsistencies.
Fractions of fractions. Almost invisible. The researchers at the facility dismissed them as instrumentation errors. The anomalies continued. Weeks became months. Months became years. The deviations grew larger. A light flickered before appearing. A message arrived before it had been transmitted. Particles were detected in locations before they could physically travel there. The scientists became fascinated. The anomalies became impossible to ignore. And then one day, the first impossible event occurred. The colony vanished. Not exploded, not destroyed. Vanished. The projection showed an inhabited city disappearing between one frame and the next. Millions of people gone. No debris, no energy release, no evidence of catastrophe. The crew stared. "What happened to them?" Lyra asked. "Unknown," the archive answered. The response sent a chill through the chamber. The architects never discovered what happened. The city simply ceased to exist. The simulation accelerated. Emergency fleets arrived and investigations began. Researchers studied every particle of the affected world. The anomalies intensified. Soon, other regions were affected. Entire research facilities disappeared. Historical records contradicted one another. Witnesses remembered events that never occurred. Some individuals appeared in databases before their birth. Others vanished from all records, despite standing in front of investigators. The laws of causality began to fracture. Soren felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't an attack. Correct, the archive answered. Not an attack. Not a weapon. Not an intelligence. The display shifted again. A vast web of observations filled the chamber. Thousands of worlds, millions of measurements. The architects had eventually reached a terrifying conclusion.
The anomaly was emerging naturally, not from an enemy, not from another civilization, from reality itself. As their technological capabilities expanded, they had begun manipulating deeper layers of existence: space, time, information, consciousness. dimensions beyond ordinary perception. Individually, each breakthrough appeared harmless. Together, they created something unexpected, something the architects struggled to describe. The archive displayed a translated approximation: emergent instability. What does that mean? Elias asked. The archive searched through countless linguistic pathways, then responded.
Reality developed conditions for self-modification. No one understood. The archive attempted another translation. The universe began altering its own operating rules. Even Tomas had no reply. The simulation expanded outward. Now, entire sectors of the galaxy appeared, regions highlighted in red. The infection spread, not through matter or energy, through possibility. Every location where advanced civilizations pushed beyond certain thresholds became vulnerable. At first, the effects were minor, then catastrophic. Stars changed age. Planets shifted position.
Civilizations disappeared from history. Some regions developed contradictory timelines that could not coexist. Others collapsed into impossible states that the archive could no longer describe. One sector blinked in and out of existence repeatedly. Another appeared to contain centuries of history compressed into minutes. A third became inaccessible because the laws of geometry themselves had changed. The projections grew increasingly unstable. Even the archive struggled to recreate them. The crew watched worlds dissolve into abstract shapes, stars folding into impossible patterns, entire constellations rewritten. Then the display stopped. A single image remained. A map of the galaxy. Nearly a quarter of it glowed red. The first collapse. The phrase appeared above the projection.
The architects had stood on the brink of extinction, not because they were losing a war, because reality itself was becoming unreliable. The archive displayed the final phase. The surviving architects abandoned their expansion, abandoned countless worlds, abandoned entire sectors. Every available resource was redirected toward one objective: containment. The first evaluators were constructed, then more and more. Millions of autonomous systems spread across known space. They monitored every anomaly, every deviation, every fluctuation, every civilization approaching dangerous thresholds.
For centuries, the network expanded. Slowly, the spread of instability began to slow, then stop. The red sectors faded, the galaxy stabilized, and reality healed. The architects celebrated because they believed they had saved existence itself. The projection dimmed, and the archive fell silent. Nadia finally spoke. So they won. The answer came immediately. No. The monolith darkened. The floating structures around them flickered. For the first time, uncertainty entered the archive's voice. The first collapse was contained, not eliminated. The galaxy map returned. This time, the crew noticed something they had missed before.
One region remained dark, not red, not stabilized, absent. A wound in the map, A section where no information existed at all. Lyra stared at it. What is that? The archive remained silent for several seconds, longer than any previous response. When it finally answered, the voice sounded almost hesitant. Data incomplete. Architect records corrupted. Designation: Sector Null. The name hung in the darkness, and a chill passed through Soren. The archive displayed a final recovered message from the architects. The recording was fragmented, ancient, damaged by millions of years, yet the translated warning remained clear. The containment network has stabilized all known regions, except one. We no longer receive data from Sector Null. We no longer understand events originating there. Observations are inconsistent. History surrounding the sector is degrading. Avoidance protocols remain active. The message ended. A new line appeared beneath it. Status of Sector Null: unknown. The crew stood motionless. For the first time since arriving on Khepri-IV, they understood the true scale of what they had uncovered. The Evaluators had not been built to guard against a monster. They had been built to guard against the collapse of reality itself. And somewhere beyond the boundaries of known space existed a region that had defeated even the architects, a place from which no reliable information had ever returned, a place where the first collapse had never truly ended. And deep within the archive, another sequence was already beginning, one that would explain why the signal had been sent, why ARCA-III had been summoned, and why humanity's future was suddenly intertwined with a mystery millions of years old.
Chapter 6: The Summons. The final words of the architect's warning faded from the monolith. The chamber fell silent once more. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of what they had learned pressed upon them like the stone of the planet above. For millions of years, humanity had looked into the stars, searching for signs of intelligence. Now they had found it, and discovered that intelligence itself might be part of a cycle older than civilization. Elias Voss stepped toward the monolith. "You said the first collapse was contained." "Correct." "You said the Evaluators stabilized reality." "Correct." "Then why send the signal?" For the first time since entering the archive, the answer did not come immediately. The floating structures throughout the chamber flickered. Data streams moved between them. The archive appeared to be searching, verifying, calculating. Then the response arrived.
Containment status: degrading. A map of the galaxy materialized above the monolith. At first glance, it appeared identical to the one shown before. Then the crew noticed the differences. Small points of light blinked throughout the projection. Thousands of them, each representing an evaluator node. Most glowed white. Some glowed amber. Others glowed red. And a disturbing number were dark. "What do the colors mean?" Nadia asked. "Active. Unstable. Offline." The answer appeared beside the map. Tomas stared. "How many are offline?" The archive highlighted the dark markers. The number appeared. 1,842,119. Nobody spoke. Almost 2 million nodes had failed.
The figure seemed impossible. Lyra looked toward the projection. How long has this been happening? The answer chilled the room. Initial failures detected. 47,223 years ago. The map zoomed inward. The crew watched the spread of failures across millennia. At first, only isolated nodes disappeared. Then, clusters. Then, entire regions.
The rate accelerated, not gradually, exponentially. The network was dying. Soren felt a knot forming in his stomach. If this has been happening for 47,000 years, why hasn't everything collapsed already? Because, the archive explained, the network had been designed with extraordinary redundancy. Millions of nodes monitored overlapping regions. When one failed, others compensated. When hundreds failed, neighboring sectors adapted. When thousands vanished, the system reorganized itself. But every adaptation came at a cost. Every failure increased the burden on what remained. The network was surviving, not recovering. The distinction mattered a great deal. The map changed again.
This time, the archive highlighted a series of sectors near the frontier of human exploration. Several nodes flashed amber, then red, then dark. A chain reaction. The pattern spread like fractures across ice. Lyra watched in silence. This isn't random. Correct. The archive displayed a new sequence. Statistical models, predictive simulations, probabilities. The failures were following a pattern. They were converging toward a threshold, toward conditions the architects had once feared. Nadia studied the data.
Then her face paled. No. Thomas looked at her. What? She pointed to one of the charts. A familiar curve. One she had seen countless times in human scientific literature. Technological growth. Civilizational complexity. Computational density. Artificial intelligence development. The graph matched humanity's trajectory almost perfectly. The realization struck the room simultaneously. The signal had not been triggered by chance. The archive had been watching humanity for a very long time.
Soren stepped forward. You've been monitoring us? Affirmative. For how long? The answer appeared. First detection of human technological activity, 8,341 years ago. Lyra exhaled slowly. The evaluators had observed the rise of every kingdom, every empire, every scientific revolution, every step from stone tools to interstellar travel. The archive continued. Civilization assessment. Humanity. Status. Advancing. Risk category. Elevated. Intervention eligibility. Qualified.
Elias narrowed his eyes. Intervention eligibility? The chamber darkened. A new recording appeared. Unlike the previous historical archives, this one seemed recent. Recent by the standards of a machine that measured time in millennia. An evaluator node, one of countless millions. It transmitted a message through the network. Node failure. A second message followed. Another failure. Then another. And another.
The sequence accelerated. Thousands. Millions.
The network's communications became fragmented, corrupted, incomplete. The archive translated the overall meaning. Successor civilizations required. The phrase appeared repeatedly, again and again, like a plea. The surviving evaluators had reached a conclusion. The architects were gone. No evidence suggested their civilization still existed. The network could no longer repair itself. No new nodes were being built, and no damaged systems were being replaced. The galaxy's greatest safeguard had become a machine without caretakers.
Slowly deteriorating, until eventually it would fail entirely. The signal sent to Khepri-IV had one purpose: to find a successor, to find a civilization capable of understanding the threat and acting before it was too late. The crew stood in stunned silence. After everything they had endured, the truth felt almost absurd. Humanity had not discovered the mystery. The mystery had discovered humanity. Tomas laughed softly, not from amusement, from disbelief. You telling me we crossed half the galaxy because an ancient machine recruited us? The archive processed the statement, then answered. Approximation acceptable.
For the first time in hours, someone smiled. The moment lasted only seconds, because the archive was not finished. A new projection appeared, a countdown, not measured in days or years, probabilities, containment stability forecasts. The numbers shifted continuously, each update worse than the last. Eventually, the calculations settled. Projected network failure, 92.4%. Projected time frame, 312 years. The room grew cold. 3 centuries. A blink of an eye on the scale of galactic history. A terrifyingly short time on the scale of civilization.
What happens if the network fails? Lyra asked quietly. The archive responded with a simulation. The galaxy appeared. Node failures spread. Containment boundaries weakened. The first anomalies returned. Temporal distortions. Causal fractures. Regions of instability. Entire systems disappearing from observation. The same pattern that had preceded the first collapse. The same pattern the architects had spent millennia suppressing. The simulation ended. No explanation was necessary. Humanity now faced the same future that had nearly destroyed the architects. Silence lingered. Then Soren asked the question none of them had wanted to voice.
Why us? The archive answered immediately, because it had already calculated the alternatives. Known technological civilizations. 3. Active interstellar civilizations. 1. The final line appeared beneath them. Humanity. The implication was staggering. Whether the other civilizations had vanished, regressed, or simply become unreachable, the result was the same. Humanity was effectively alone. Perhaps not in the universe, but in the region that still mattered. The archive's voice softened. A subtle change, as though the machine understood the burden it was placing upon them.
Signal objective. Knowledge transfer complete. Primary request follows.
The galaxy map returned. This time, only one location remained illuminated. The dark wound in space they had seen before. The place absent from every reliable record. The place even the architects had feared. Sector Null. The archive focused upon it. Node after node vanished around its perimeter. Entire containment regions terminated there. Every trail led to the same destination. The same mystery. The same unknown. For millions of years, the network had observed the spread of instability. And every investigation eventually pointed toward a single source. Sector Null. The archive displayed one final statement. Cause of network failure. Unknown. Probability of connection to Sector Null, 97.8%. The room remained silent. At last, humanity understood why the signal had been sent. Not as a warning, a distress call, or an invitation. It was a mission. One that had waited millions of years for someone to accept. And beyond the frozen crust of Khepri-IV, beyond the boundaries of explored space, the answer awaited in a region that had already defeated the architects themselves. Sector Null. The place where the network began to die. Chapter 7. Into the Dark. The image of Sector Null hovered above the monolith. A wound in the galaxy. A place where information ended. A place where certainty died. For several minutes, no one spoke. The archive had given them answers, but with every answer had come larger questions. Finally, Commander Elias Voss broke the silence. What exactly are you asking us to do? The response came immediately. Investigate source of network failure. Assess status of Sector Null. Report findings. Tomas let out a short laugh. That's all? No response. The silence itself seemed like an answer. Soren studied the dark region suspended above them. Do you even know what's in there? Negative. You've been monitoring it for millions of years. Affirmative. And you still don't know? Correct. The answer unsettled him more than anything else the archive had revealed. The Evaluators had monitored entire civilizations, tracked the evolution of species, observed the rise and fall of empires. Yet Sector Null remained beyond their understanding. Elias turned toward the crew. We need to decide what happens next. The statement carried enormous weight. Because for the first time since leaving Earth, the mission no longer had a defined destination. The signal had been found, and the mystery had been uncovered. Everything from this point forward would be a choice. The crew gathered around the projection table. The dark image of Sector Null hung above them like a shadow. Nadia spoke first. We return home. Everyone looked at her. We've discovered proof of extraterrestrial civilizations, proof that humanity isn't alone, proof that a galactic containment network exists. She pointed toward the map. Earth needs to know. Tomas nodded slowly. She's not wrong. The engineer folded his arms. If what we've learned is true, humanity deserves the chance to prepare. Lyra remained silent. Her gaze never left Sector Null. Finally, Elias looked toward her. You disagree. It wasn't a question. Lyra took a long breath, then nodded. How long to get home? The question hung in the air. Soren answered. Just under 4 years. 4 years there, 4 years for any response to reach us, longer for a return mission. She turned toward the others. Best case, we're talking about nearly a decade before anyone acts on this information. No one argued, because she was right. Interstellar distances had a way of making urgency irrelevant. Civilizations thought in years. Galaxies thought in centuries. The archive's projection shifted. The containment forecast reappeared. 312 years. Not tomorrow or next week, but not far away either. A clock was already ticking. Nadia looked at the countdown. 3 centuries is still a long time. Unless the estimate is wrong, Lyra replied. The room fell silent. Everyone had seen enough data to understand the problem. Forecasts assumed stable conditions, and the network was anything but stable. A system that had survived millions of years was now deteriorating in ways even its creators had not anticipated. The countdown could be accurate, or it could be catastrophically optimistic. Soren stared at the map. Something continued bothering him.
A question he had not yet asked. He turned toward the archive. The architects. The chamber responded. Query acknowledged. What happened to them? Silence. The longest silence the archive had given. Data streams flickered throughout the chamber. Fragments of ancient records appeared and vanished. At last, an answer emerged. Status: unknown. The response sent a chill through everyone. Unknown. The archive displayed the final surviving record concerning the architects. A partially corrupted transmission millions of years old, recovered from an evaluator node near Sector Null.
The message appeared in translated text. Network expansion complete. Containment remains stable. Additional investigation teams dispatched. Sector Null remains unresolved. We believe understanding may now be possible. If this report is our last, signal corruption detected. Further data unavailable. The message ended. There were no later records. No farewell. No evidence of war. No evidence of collapse. The architects had simply vanished from history, as though they had stepped into the darkness and never returned.
The realization settled heavily over the crew. The greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known had disappeared while investigating the very mystery now hanging above them. Thomas broke the silence. That's not exactly encouraging. No, Soren admitted. It isn't. Elias walked to the observation window at the far end of the chamber. Beyond it stretched the vast underground cavern. Ancient machinery, silent structures, millions of years of waiting. The evaluators had endured longer than mountains, longer than species, longer than civilizations. And now, they were dying, waiting for someone else to take responsibility. The commander stood quietly for a long time.
When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured, certain. We can return to Earth. Nobody interrupted. We can spend years traveling home. He looked back at the crew. We can spend more years convincing governments, corporations, and military alliances that what we found is real. His eyes shifted towards Sector Null. Or we can continue. The room remained silent. Elias continued. We are closer to the answer than anyone in human history. He looked at each member of the crew. We have the ship. We have the archive. And we have the coordinates.
And according to every system in this chamber, we may be the only people who can reach the source before the situation gets worse. Nadia looked down. Not because she disagreed, because she understood. Tomas rubbed his face, then slowly nodded. I hate this plan. A faint smile crossed Elias's face. So do I. Lyra laughed softly. For a moment, the tension broke. Then Soren stepped toward the projection, toward the dark region at the edge of known space, where the architects had vanished. What happens if we go there? The question echoed through the chamber. The archive considered.
Then answered with a single word: unknown. No probabilities, forecasts, or calculations. Simply unknown. For the first time since entering the archive, the machine had nothing more to offer. Soren nodded slowly, then asked the final question. And what happens if we don't? The chamber became silent. Several seconds passed. Then the response appeared. Containment failure probability, 92.4%. No one needed further explanation. The decision had already been made. The archive sensed it. The projection changed.
A stream of coordinates flowed across the monolith. A route. The last known path taken by the architects, leading towards Sector Null. Mission designation updated. The words appeared in brilliant white. Designation recognized. Vessel, ARCA-III. Human civilization, confirmed. Successor status, Evaluator Expedition 1. Primary objective, investigate Sector Null. Secondary objective, determine cause of network failure. The chamber brightened. Across the immense archive, dormant systems awakened.
The data packages began transferring to ARCA-III. Star charts, historical records, containment protocols, millions of years of accumulated knowledge, the inheritance of a vanished civilization. The transfer continued for nearly an hour. When it was complete, the monolith dimmed. The archive had given them everything it possessed. The rest would have to be discovered. The chamber grew quiet. For the first time since they had entered the ancient archive, no projections filled the air. No maps hovered above the monolith. No data streams crossed the darkness. Only silence remained. Then the voice spoke one final time. The architects preserved knowledge. The evaluators preserved stability. Both are failing.
The responsibility now passes to you. No one answered. There was nothing to say. The words carried the weight of millions of years, the inheritance of a vanished civilization, the burden of a dying network, the future of a species that had only recently begun reaching for the stars. The monolith's light slowly faded. Archive functions entered standby. The chamber darkened.
For the first time in millions of years, Khepri-IV had fulfilled its purpose. The crew of ARCA-III turned toward the elevator. Their answers lay behind them, and the unknown lay ahead. Hours later, the crew stood once more aboard ARCA-III. Khepri-IV slowly receded behind them, a frozen world that had spent millions of years guarding a secret.
Ahead lay unexplored space. Beyond that lay Sector Null. No human had ever traveled so far from Earth. No human had ever carried a mission of such consequence. Elias settled into the command chair. Navigation? Soren entered the coordinates. The route appeared across the main display, a line extending into darkness. Course plotted? Engineering? Tomas grinned despite himself. Drive is ready. EVA and science? Nadia nodded. Ready. Lyra looked at the stars ahead, at the unknown waiting beyond them.
Ready. Elias took one final look at the shrinking world behind them, then turned forward. Engage. Outside the ship, the stars began to stretch. Space folded, light bent. ARCA-III accelerated toward the frontier of known existence. Behind them lay humanity. Ahead lay a mystery older than civilization itself. Somewhere beyond the darkness waited the answer to a question that had already consumed the architects. And as the ship vanished into the void, the silent evaluators continued their vigil, watching, waiting, hoping. For the first time in millions of years, someone was heading toward the place where the network began to fail, toward the place where the architects vanished, toward the place where reality first began to unravel, toward Sector Null. For the first time in millions of years, someone was going back.